The courtroom froze as 66-year-old Willard Franklin straightened, his knotted hands brushing the Purple Heart on his chest. "Take it off, or be held in contempt," Judge Ronald Beckett snapped. Willard met his eyes and said softly, "I bled for this medal decades before you ever touched that robe." Around him, breath stilled. The room understood the stakes. Before we press deeper into this charged story about one man defying an unjust command, drop a quick comment telling us where you're watching from. Anyone in your family serve? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications if you believe in standing up for what's right, even when the system stacks the deck. This is how a decorated veteran's quiet backbone ignited a national reckoning. Willard Franklin never set out to become a symbol. On a sharp autumn morning, the 66-year-old Black Army veteran with 35 years of exemplary service simply answered a jury summons from the Birmingham, Alabama courthouse, cane in hand and purpose steady. Pain sparked in his right leg, a stubborn memento from a Desert Storm ambush, as he eased toward his weathered sedan. He had considered asking out due to lingering combat injuries, but ditching a civic duty felt wrong to a career soldier. Routine guided him, calm breath, squared shoulders, standards never slipping. Willard pressed his dress blues to razor creases, buffed brass until it gleamed, and aligned his decorations with obsessive care. The Purple Heart sat in pride's position, recalling the day in 1991 when hot metal tore his thigh, yet failed to puncture his resolve. Every ribbon echoed comrades' sacrifices, living and gone. To Willard, wearing his uniform honored the justice system, another institution he'd sworn to protect. He couldn't know that this simple choice would trigger a collision between authority and dignity. The Jefferson County Courthouse rose against the Alabama sky, stone columns projecting permanence, while inside marble floors sent his polished footsteps ringing. Authority radiated from every cornice, expecting obedience. Security officers and citizens parting for jury duty tracked him with curious looks. Most stepped aside, some nodded, a few whispered behind palms. Willard had long grown used to uniforms drawing praise and provocation. The assembly room hummed until he entered. He chose a back row seat, posture ramrod straight despite years and injuries. Within minutes, a pattern appeared as officials called panels for questioning. Black candidates drew heavier scrutiny and quick dismissals for flimsy reasons. Willard watched without comment, face unreadable. Another discipline learned serving under questionable leaders. A white bailiff with a blotchy jawline swaggered over, eyeing Willard's decorations as if they were contraband. "Lose the costume before you go in," the bailiff smirked, uniform tugging at his waist. Willard held his gaze. "This isn't a costume. These are earned United States Army medals from 35 years' service." The man rolled his eyes. "Sure thing, Grandpa. Just ditch the Halloween gear before Judge Beckett spots you." Willard's group number was called. He entered with dignity intact, back straight as a flagpole. Courtroom 3B belonged to Judge Ronald Beckett, a jurist whose reputation arrived like thunder before the storm. Strict decorum, rulings that somehow hit minorities hardest. Beckett's eyes narrowed immediately at Willard's uniformed silhouette. The disapproval felt physical, a pressure at the ribs, daring him to shrink. The case involved a barely 21-year-old black defendant accused of shoplifting from an upscale boutique. Despite the usually minor charge, the prosecutor pressed for maximum penalties based on a juvenile record. Evidence looked thin, mostly a manager's word. Willard recognized the pattern. His own son had once faced similar assumptions of guilt, clearly. During voir dire, Willard answered crisply, drawing on military precision. Asked about impartiality, he said, "I swore to protect justice for all Americans. That oath doesn't expire." Something in his unflustered calm seemed to satisfy both attorneys, and he was seated, one of only two black jurors, among a largely white panel. Calmly, on recess, stretching his aching leg, Willard overheard Beckett whisper to his clerk just beyond the corner. "These people need reminding of their place, coming in like they run things. This isn't the 60s. The reply was muffled, but Beckett's chuckle carried. Keep the right kind on juries. You understand. The words weren't new. The audacity, though, still burned. Willard's expression didn't change, but his grip tightened on the cane. He'd heard versions of that refrain all his life. Back in session, Beckett's gaze kept snagging on Willard's ribbons, especially the Purple Heart, irritation rising through the afternoon. When the defense asked a follow-up, Willard answered steady, describing the gravity of deciding another's fate. It's like command, he said. Your choices affect lives. Beckett cut him off. Mr. Franklin, this isn't the military. It's my courtroom. Willard nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I was drawing a parallel about responsibility. Several jurors nodded. Beckett's jaw worked, color edging toward crimson as control slipped an inch. Control, he knew, depended on posture as much as words. That night, Willard returned to his modest Smithfield home. Photos lined the hall, a young recruit grinning, Desert Storm brothers in arms, some never returning, a general pinning his Purple Heart, Willard and his late wife Lorraine on their 40th anniversary, not long before cancer stole her. Willard with his daughter Tara and grandson Malcolm at graduation. His leg throbbed while he readied for bed. VA doctors had warned the nerve damage might worsen with age, but Willard refused stronger meds, preferring clear thoughts over comfortable haze. Hanging his uniform, fingertips tracing the Purple Heart's cool rim, he couldn't imagine how that ribbon would soon become the centerpiece of a wider fight. Day 2 broke desert clear, the kind of air that sharpens colors and sounds. He dressed with ritual care, buttons aligned, medals level, shoes mirrored to black glass. The Purple Heart burned brighter against the cloth, a splash of blood and memory. In the corridor, a young officer approached without meeting Willard's eyes. Judge Beckett wants to see you before proceeding, the officer said. Willard livered up with his cane and followed past portraits of past judges, a sea of white faces. Beckett's chambers smelled of leather and power. Law books lined mahogany. Framed credentials covered a wall. Golf trophies gleamed beside photos with politicians and CEOs. Beckett didn't rise. Mr. Franklin, your regalia is inappropriate. It could sway jurors. Willard stood at parade rest, instinctive as breathing. Respectfully, there's no rule prohibiting military decorations. I wear them to honor the oath I took to defend the Constitution, same one governing this courtroom. Beckett's mouth tightened. My courtroom, my rules. When you return tomorrow, remove all medals and insignia. Clear? Willard inhaled. Sir, these represent 35 years of service. This Purple Heart marks the day I almost died, pulling my unit from an ambush. 3 men went home. Beckett flicked a hand. We all make choices. I chose law school. Different paths, different rewards. The dismissal cut deeper than expected. Did you serve, Your Honor? Beckett's eyes cooled. Irrelevant. I received a Vietnam deferment. My father believed my talents belonged elsewhere. Willard noted the Rolex, the photos at exclusive clubs, places long notorious for blocking black membership. Tomorrow, no medals, Beckett repeated, or contempt. The message was unmistakable. Comply or be crushed. Willard held his composure. I understand your position. Strategy mattered. That evening, he sat with Malcolm, a second-year law student home on break. There's no legal basis, Malcolm said, pounding keys. Decorations aren't banned. Cases support your right. Willard played devil's advocate. Authority exists. Malcolm shot back. Not limitless, Grandpa. Boundaries, Malcolm insisted. Protect rights when power refuses restraint. Why does my uniform bother him? Willard asked. All of it, Malcolm said. You represent something he can't buy. Earned respect. Men like Beckett curate the story. Your existence disrupts it. Later, at Lorraine's grave, moonlight silvered identical stones. Democracy in death. What would you tell me, Wren? He whispered. Stand your ground. Undeniably. On the drive home, Tara called. Marcus told me what happened. Daddy, be careful. Beckett has friends, the kind that make problems. I'm not crossing anyone, Willard said. I won't dishonor what these medals stand for. Two older veterans rang next, one fiery, one cautious, backing him while warning judges, remember perceived slights forever. Memories flooded when sleep finally came, scorching desert heat, the dead weight of a wounded comrade over his shoulders, the white-hot punch of a sniper round, months of rehab coaxing nerves awake. Discrimination shadowed his service, passed over promotions, mistaken identity, double standards. Still, he kept faith that perseverance could clear roadways for others. He chose. He would wear his medals. A worry tugged. If Beckett removed him, what became of the boy on trial? Would losing a fair-minded juror cost freedom? Across town, reporter Anita Chen worked late, chasing a tip about tensions in Beckett's courtroom. A janitor described a confrontation with a black veteran juror. The pieces pointed toward a showdown stretching beyond one man and one judge. Day 3 arrived with rain drum beating Willard's windows. He moved deliberately, ritual steadying his nerves. The courthouse buzzed, but the air felt charged. Eyes following, conversations pausing, security unusually attentive. Combat taught him this electricity, the moment before engagements ignite. Courtroom 3B was unusually crowded for a shoplifting case. When Willard entered, heads turned. Among unfamiliar faces sat a young Asian woman with a small reporter's notebook half hidden. Beckett swept in. The all-rise carried expectation and heat. His gaze locked on the Purple Heart, a vein jumping at his temple as he settled. "Mr. Franklin," Beckett called, cutting off the clerk's script. "Approach." Willard rose, cane steadying his steps. "I instructed you to remove those medals. You defied this court." Willard kept his shoulders square. "Your Honor, I'm not in full uniform today. I chose only this Purple Heart, awarded for wounds received while defending fellow soldiers under fire." "Remove it now," Beckett said, fingers whitening on the bench, "or I'll hold you in contempt." Every ear strained. Willard felt the weight of decades of small humiliations demanding surrender. "This medal represents bloodshed for the Constitution that governs your authority," he said. "I can't, and won't, dishonor that sacrifice to soothe discomfort." The gavel cracked like a rifle report. "Contempt. Bailiff, remove Mr. Franklin from the jury pool. Fine him $1,000. The bailiff approached, clearly unhappy. As Willard turned, something extraordinary. An elderly white man stood, then a middle-aged woman, then a young black man. Within seconds, half the courtroom rose in silent solidarity. Beckett's face contorted. "Sit down or join him in contempt." People sank back, message delivered. Willard walked out unbowed. In the corridor, the reporter intercepted. "Anita Chen, Birmingham Post. Your side?" Willard examined her earnest focus. "No sides, only right and wrong. The judge demanded I degrade my sacrifice. I declined." Her pen raced. "Why the Purple Heart specifically?" she asked. Willard paused. "Ask him. I only know this medal marks a day I nearly died so others might live. I won't erase that reality for anyone's comfort." By mid-afternoon, Anita's article posted, "Judge orders veteran to dishonor his sacrifice." A photo showed Willard, medal visible, dignity intact. The story erupted, first local, then national. Beckett's chambers flooded with angry calls. Veterans groups condemned the order. The VFW issued a blistering statement. Packages arrived at the courthouse, purple heart-shaped paper cutouts, a quiet avalanche of protest. News vans clustered near Willard's modest porch. He unplugged his phone and kept his voice measured. "This isn't about one judge," he told the few he acknowledged. "It's about honoring sacrifice regardless of who made it." Have you ever watched someone hold the line when backing down was easier? Comment 1, if Willard was right to keep the medal on. 2, if you'd follow the order. Like and subscribe for the continuation. What would come next? Would Beckett retreat or double down? He chose the latter. The next morning, he issued a statement. "The court's dignity requires adherence to directives. Mr. Franklin's grandstanding compromises impartial justice. The fine is doubled. Continued defiance risks jail." Malcolm read it aloud while Willard brewed tea, jaw working. He can't do that, Grandpa, Malcolm said, pacing. That's overreach. We should file a judicial ethics complaint. Willard watched the fire he recognized. We consider all angles first, he counseled. 15 years builds fortresses. A knock. Warren Harcourt, the county court administrator, gray hair, tailored suit, entering Willard's simple living room with measured calm. This has gotten out of hand, Harcourt said. The judge feels undermined. Media chaos disrupts operations. He'll reduce the fine if you apologize publicly and acknowledge his authority for the good of the system. Willard studied the man's neutrality, the way pressure hid behind civility. It sounded like compromise. It smelled like capitulation. Mr. Harcourt, I gave 35 years to a system promising equal justice, Willard said. I nearly died for it. What does it say if I apologize for wearing a medal that symbolizes that fight? Harcourt's tone didn't change. It says the system is run by human beings with pride and power. Wisdom is choosing battles. After Harcourt left, an unmarked car idled at the curb. Detective Jason Morris knocked, declining coffee. Just checking you're okay with all the attention. His eyes scanned family photos, lingering on Tara at a voter registration drive. Your daughter does admirable work. The implication floated between them, smoke without flame, warning without words. Anything I can help you with, Detective? Willard asked. Morris smiled without warmth. Not now. Judge Beckett is an important figure. He has friends. It'd be unfortunate if this escalated. Later, Malcolm called. My scholarship is suddenly under review? A dean's vague concern? Willard felt the cold weight of reach, longer than anticipated, and intentional. The next morning brought fresh hits. Willard's military pension deposit, usually clockwork, never landed. The VA said his account was under review with no timeline. The neighborhood grocer, suddenly awkward, claimed his store credit was canceled. The Bar Association issued a lukewarm note lauding judicial authority, hedging around the specifics like a dancer avoiding glass. Mail arrived resealed. Phone calls carried a faint echo. Rumors sprouted. Anonymous whispers questioning Willard's record, implying medals obtained by clerical convenience rather than valor. Anyone who knew him or could read service papers would laugh, but the goal wasn't truth. It was fog. Tara called. A promised promotion evaporated after a Sunday golf conversation. Alone at his table, Willard weighed principle against cost. Then the phone rang. Charlene Williams, mother of the defendant. Mr. Franklin, thank you. My son Jaden isn't what they're painting. He's made mistakes, yes, but he's not a thief. She described stops for walking while black and security footage that undercut the boutique manager's certainty. Judge Beckett has handled several of Jaden's cases, she said, voice tight. Always maximum penalties, never a benefit of the doubt. Her words stiffened Willard's spine. That evening at the VFW, veterans of every stripe pledged support. He's connected, warned Thomas Colton, a Vietnam vet and former councilman. Old money closes ranks. Expect a grind. Willard expected it. Returning home, he found his front door sprayed with slurs. Before he fetched cleaner, neighbors materialized with scrub brushes and solvent, young and old, black and white, erasing the stain together. By morning, an official complaint arrived at the Army alleging misrepresentation of honors, anonymous but stamped with familiar fingerprints of influence. The stakes sharpened. This wasn't about one medal or a wounded ego. It was a stress test. Could power grind dignity into dust? Could sacrifice be diminished by those who'd never made one? Did justice wear a blindfold or merely peek? Willard visited Lorraine's grave again, sharing the burden with the only person who'd always steadied him. Meanwhile, Anita kept digging. She traced Beckett's club memberships to institutions with long histories of exclusion, integrated by law, segregated by cost and custom. Donations linked him to developers accused of clearing black families from gentrifying neighborhoods, cases he'd ruled on despite conflicts. Patterns aligned too neatly to be coincidence. They drew a map of entitlement. Unaware of those findings, Willard drafted a complaint to the state judicial ethics body, challenging Beckett's order and the retaliations that followed. Across town, Beckett sat in his paneled study, swirling scotch, phoning allies, and calling favors. Neither man could retreat. The fight had moved beyond a decorum dispute into a battle over defining America. The morning after Willard filed, a call arrived. Mr. Franklin, Rowena, Washington, Southern Justice Initiative. We'd like to represent you pro bono. Willard knew the name. She'd steered landmark civil rights cases. Judge Beckett seldom scares me, she said dryly. Men like him lean on intimidation because their legal footing is quicksand. Today, your involvement could bring heat, Willard warned. Washington laughed without mirth. I've been in hotter kitchens. While he considered, something remarkable spread nationwide. Veterans mailed their medals to Willard in solidarity. Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, Silver Stars, often with notes. Wear mine too, wrote a Marine from Oregon. My grandfather earned this in Korea, penned a Floridian. Boxes stacked in Willard's hallway. Medal, ribbon, history. Malcolm rallied law students across the country, building a network cataloging judicial overreach. Beckett isn't unique, he said, but patterns matter. A retired Supreme Court justice issued a statement questioning Beckett's reasoning. Authority exists only within constitutional bounds. Ordering removal of a Purple Heart likely exceeded them. Then a voice from the past. General Marcus Richards, 4-star, called. Franklin, heard you're still fighting the good fight, he barked. My staff's pinging the Pentagon. This judge picked the wrong veteran. Support spilled beyond military circles. Jaden's case moved to another judge. After review, the charges were dismissed for lack of evidence and tainted procedure. In Washington, a bipartisan bloc of veteran lawmakers voiced concern about the precedent. We can't allow decorated veterans to be disrespected by institutions their sacrifice sustains, declared Congresswoman Elena Martinez, herself a former Army captain. The story reached Captain John Whitaker, a white soldier Willard had carried from that firefight, the day Willard's thigh caught lead. I have children and grandchildren because Willard Franklin valued my life above his own safety, Whitaker told a national program. Questioning his honor or his right to wear that medal is questioning sacrifice itself. The Army released Willard's service records, unusually transparent, detailing commendations and the action that earned the Purple Heart, neutralizing the smear with documented fact. Anita's deep dive added numbers. Beckett had dismissed black jurors at triple the rate of white jurors across 5 years, a statistical anomaly too sharp to ignore. Her front-page expose intensified attention. Online, Brista Medals of Honor surged as veterans posted photos wearing decorations in solidarity. Athletes and artists amplified Willard's story far beyond Birmingham's grid of streets. Malcolm organized classmates to assist people stung by dubious rulings in Beckett's Cadet's courtroom, documenting a pattern of bias that strengthened Willard's complaint. Willard still refused the spotlight, declining to headline rallies. It isn't about me, he said. It's about respect for sacrifice, whoever made it. He preferred steadfast presence over applause and podium lights. Tara's community network surfaced case after case where Beckett ruled favorably for members of his exclusive golf club, charges softened for a donor's son, favorable decisions for developers sharing tea times. The conflict of interest smoke grew into flame. Letters arrived from black veterans recounting fresh humiliations despite service, courtrooms doubting, bankers sneering, doors closing, while medals gleamed. Wore my uniform to my custody hearing, one wrote. Judge asked if I rented it. Another, Saul applied for a loan wearing my pins. Bank told me to try a thrift store. Willard read them slowly, absorbing the ache under the ink. He stacked each letter like a brick in a wall he refused to let crumble. He knew the cost would climb. He knew power hates being contradicted by someone it can't buy, bluff, or bury. And yet the path felt unavoidable. One step, then another, back straight, eyes forward. the same way you move in a firefight, not recklessly, but without yielding. Dignity, he believed, is a practiced muscle. Judge Ronald Beckett had never felt heat like this. Calls jammed his clerk's line, emails piled up with subject lines reading shame and unfit to serve. Local veterans announced plans to wear their medals into court in solidarity. A few retired commanders issued statements questioning his order's legal basis. The defendant's lawyer moved to disqualify Beckett for bias. Beckett, stubborn and proud, refused to retreat. Next morning, he doubled down publicly. The dignity of this court depends upon compliance. Mr. Franklin's theatrics undermine impartial justice. He doubled the fine and hinted at jail time. Malcolm read the statement aloud while Willard stirred his tea, the spoon clicking like a metronome marking rising stakes and narrowing exits. He can't do this, Malcolm said, pacing. It's beyond his authority. We file with the Judicial Ethics Board. Willard watched his grandson's fire with a complex pride. Fortresses stand on favors, he cautioned. We need strategy. A knock sounded. Warren Harcourt, county court administrator, stood at the door in a raincoat and a carefully neutral expression. Mr. Franklin, Harcourt said, settling into a straight-backed chair, this situation is disrupting court operations. The judge is prepared to reduce the fine to a token amount if you issue a public apology, acknowledging his authority. Willard studied Harcourt's deliberate calm, recognizing the velvet over brass. The pitch was compromise. The payload was capitulation, wrapped in etiquette. I gave 35 years to the promise of equal justice, Willard replied evenly. I nearly died for it. What does it say if I apologize for wearing the emblem of that sacrifice? Harcourt's face didn't move. It says systems are run by people with pride and power. Wisdom is knowing when a stand becomes self-harm. He left without shaking hands. Shortly after, an unmarked sedan idled at Willard's curb. Detective Jason Morris appeared, genial smile stopping short of his eyes. He declined coffee, complimented family photos, lingered on Tara at a voter drive. A lot of attention brings scrutiny, he said. Judge Beckett has friends. Would be unfortunate if things escalated. The air smelled like threat, disguised as neighborly concern. Is there something you need, Detective? Willard asked. Not today, Morris said softly. Just keeping lines open. Later Malcolm called, voice tight. My scholarship got flagged for review. Vague concerns about academic fit. Willard felt cold gravity settle in. The reach was long, the message precise. Power would brush every life he loved unless he bowed. The next morning, routine protections failed. Willard's pension deposit didn't arrive. The VA said his account was under administrative review, timeline unclear. The neighborhood grocer abruptly canceled his long-standing credit, eyes averted. The County Bar Association issued a mealy statement praising judicial authority while vaguely acknowledging complex issues, a paragraph that tried to face both ways and pleased no one. His mail looked opened. Phone calls carried a faint echo. Whisper campaigns bloomed, suggesting his record was embellished, medals obtained by clerical error. People who knew him laughed, but truth wasn't the point. Fog was. Tara reported a promised promotion evaporating after a Sunday tea time. Willard held the phone silent, while anger coiled without breaking his voice. Alone at the kitchen table, he weighed principle against damage. The phone rang. Mr. Franklin, Charlene Williams, Jaden's mother. Her voice trembled with dignity. Thank you for standing up. My son's a good kid. He's not what they say. She described repeated stops, different treatment for a white friend, store footage undermining the manager's claim, patterns, not coincidences. Judge Beckett's handled 3 of Jaden's matters, she added. Always maximum penalties, never benefit of doubt. Her words stiffened Willard's resolve. That evening, he attended VFW Hall. The veterans, across generations, pledged support. The judge has deep connections, cautioned Thomas Colton, a Vietnam vet and former councilman. Old networks will grind you down. Count on pressure, smear and patience weaponized. Willard nodded. He returned home to find his door spray-painted with slurs, bright and wet under the porch light. Before he could fetch cleaner, neighbors arrived with solvent and brushes, young and old, black and white, scrubbing until wood showed smooth again. No speeches, no drama, just shared hands. By dawn, an anonymous complaint hit the Army's inbox. It alleged misrepresentation of honors and conduct unbecoming a veteran. Anyone could smell the fingerprints. The stakes were now formal, beyond one man's wounded pride, into institutions testing whether power could humiliate sacrifice. Willard visited Lorraine's grave again, the cemetery stones standing even and quiet. He shared the weight with her the way he always had, wordlessly, faithfully. Meanwhile, reporter Anita Chin kept digging. She followed Beckett's memberships to exclusive clubs with long documented histories of exclusion, integrated on paper, segregated by gatekeeping costs and wink-nod traditions. She mapped donations linking him to developers who'd cleared black families from gentrifying tracts. Beckett had ruled in some cases despite conflicts. The pattern formed a stark silhouette of entitlement. Unaware of Anita's freshest findings, Willard drafted a complaint to the State Judicial Ethics Commission, laying out Beckett's order and the cascade of retaliation. Across town, Beckett sipped scotch in a paneled study, working the phone like an organist. Favors called, debts collected, reputations enlisted. Neither man could retreat now. The question was whose narrative would harden first. Next morning brought an unexpected voice. Mr. Franklin, Rowena Washington, Southern Justice Initiative. We'd like to represent you pro bono. Willard recognized the name. She'd notched landmark civil rights wins. Beckett's intimidation doesn't scare me, she said. Men leaning on power usually know their legal footing is swamp. Willard warned involvement would draw fire. She exhaled a humorless laugh. I've been on hotter front lines, she said. As Willard considered, something remarkable unfurled nationwide. Veterans began mailing their medals, Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, Silver Stars, arriving with notes that broke and mended him at once. Wear mine too, wrote a Marine from Oregon. My granddad earned this in Korea, wrote a woman from Florida. Boxes stacked like testimony. Malcolm federated a network of law students, building a shared repository of judicial overreach cases. Beckett isn't unique, he said, but data is leverage. A retired Supreme Court justice issued a statement. Judicial authority must stay within constitutional bounds. Ordering removal of a decoration symbolizing sacrifice likely exceeds those limits. The line landed like a gavel in daylight. A call came from past command. Franklin, barked General Marcus Richards, I hear you're still fighting the good fight. My staff is pinging the Pentagon. This judge misjudged his target. Meanwhile, Jaden's case moved to a different judge under pressure. After a clean review, charges were dismissed. Insufficient evidence and questionable procedure. Relief washed through Willard's shoulders like rain. In Washington, a bipartisan bloc of veteran lawmakers raised alarms about precedent. We cannot dishonor those who preserved our institutions, said Congresswoman Elena Martinez, a former Army captain. Then Captain John Whitaker, white, and the man Willard had carried that day in the desert, stepped forward publicly. I have a whole life because Willard chose mine over his comfort, he told national television, questioning his right to wear that medal questions sacrifice itself. The Army, in a rare move, released Willard's service records, commendations listed, the firefight documented, the medical report stark, the smear campaign collapsed beneath stamped dates and signatures. Anita's next piece quantified jury strikes. Beckett dismissed black jurors at triple the rate of white ones across 5 years. Her front-page expose detonated statewide and then nationally. Online, where medals of honor surged, veterans posting photos in uniform and blues, medals catching kitchen light and parking lot sun. Athletes and artists amplified the story. Malcolm's team launched clinics for people burned by dubious rulings from Beckett's courtroom, cataloging patterns that strengthened Willard's complaint with data, affidavits, and lived testimony. Willard refused to climb onto a stage. It's not about me, he told organizers. Respect the sacrifice, whoever made it. Tara's community network traced a crumb trail. Beckett's favorable rulings aligned suspiciously with his club's member list. Charges softened for a donor's son, pro-developer decisions favoring regular foursomes. The smoke thickened into visible flame, then into sirens. Letters poured in from black veterans recounting fresh indignities despite service. Wore my dress uniform to a custody hearing. Judge asked if I'd rented it. Another bank officer stared at my ribbons, told me a consignment shop might suit my budget. Willard read each slowly, placing them in a neat stack, building a wall against erasure one page at a time. The Southern Justice Initiative filed Willard's ethics complaint with surgical precision, attaching Anita's reporting, juror strike analyses, affidavits about retaliation, and veteran statements on the meaning of medals. They argued Beckett's order trampled constitutional rights and violated canons of judicial conduct. They requested emergency review. Beckett responded with a statement about decorum, the word trembling under the weight it was asked to carry. County officials maneuvered to insulate the courthouse, installing barricades and issuing press passes. Veterans gathered anyway, quietly, medals bright against raincoats. Some brought photocopies of their DD-214s in plastic sleeves. There were no chants, no bullhorns, just posture, presence, and gravity. A grandmother pressed Willard's hand, whispering, "For my brother who didn't come home." He nodded. Promise received. Detective Morris returned, tone honeyed. "Tension's high," he murmured. "Think of your family. De-escalation helps everyone." Willard kept his voice cool. "My family lives with the outcomes of men who confuse obedience with justice." Morris's smile tightened. "Consequences ripple, Mr. Franklin." Willard glanced at the medals mailed from strangers, steel and ribbon arranged like a choir refusing silence. A late-night segment put Willard's story alongside statistics about judicial bias, jury exclusion, and sentencing disparities. The host asked if this was about one judge or many systems. Willard, appearing briefly by phone, answered, "It's about stewardship. Authority isn't a crown, it's a responsibility. We entrusted a courtroom to a man who forgot the difference." Viewers leaned closer. The next morning, an appellate clerk leaked that the Ethics Commission had fast-tracked preliminary review. Beckett's allies scrambled, urging patience and process. Donations to the Southern Justice Initiative spiked. A Birmingham pastor invited veterans to stand in Sunday service and prayed for humility and power. Willard sat in the last pew, hat in hand, eyes glistening quietly. Anita published another piece, this time following money. Real estate LLCs daisy-chained through shell entities, donations cycling toward judicial campaigns, signatures repeating like fingerprints. She quoted canon commentary on impartiality and appearances thereof. Lawyers began whispering that Beckett's continued presence on the bench undermined court legitimacy. The courthouse press room overflowed. Beckett refused questions, jaw clenched. Malcolm's network presented a binder of cases where litigants alleged retaliatory pressure, scholarships flagged, inspections scheduled, permits delayed, after adverse publicity about local officials. Patterns didn't prove causation, but they painted a mural of plausible tactics. "We're not special," Malcolm said. "We're simply visible." Willard squeezed his shoulder. "Visibility is a duty when others are forced to be invisible." A quiet afternoon brought a knock. Captain Whitaker stood there, silver-haired and steady, the scar under his collar visible when he turned. "You carried me when I couldn't walk," he said. "Let me carry a part of this." He offered a statement and his presence at any hearing. Willard swallowed hard, pride and gratitude mixing like sunlight and rain. The Army's Public Affairs Office held a rare briefing, confirming Willard's record and lauding his conduct under fire. They wouldn't comment on ongoing ethics matters, but closed with a line that traveled fast. "The meaning of a Purple Heart is not situational." Overnight, a mural appeared downtown, a stylized metal transforming into a balanced scale, rain-slick and luminous. Tara's contacts surfaced emails suggesting preferential docketing for cases involving Beckett's social circle. Reporters pressed the court administrator. Harcourt insisted procedures were neutral. Neutrality, Anita wrote, has a scent when it's been perfumed to hide smoke. Veterans kept arriving, some in faded uniforms, others in suits with lapel pins. They formed a quiet perimeter, witnesses to a moment demanding clarity. Churches organized food tables. A barber shop offered free cuts to veterans. A diner reserved a corner booth where strangers could sit, talk, and be heard. Willard spent afternoons there sometimes, listening. A Vietnam medic told him, "Respect costs institutions nothing until someone demands it be paid." Willard nodded. "And then they call it disruption." The medic smiled sadly. The Ethics Commission scheduled a hearing date. Beckett filed a motion challenging jurisdiction and decrying media pressure. Rowena Washington filed a response that read like tempered steel. "No judge's dignity outweighs constitutional guarantees," it said. "Decorum is not a cudgel for erasing sacrifice." The courthouse announced new security protocols. Veterans straightened their jackets and came anyway, unfazed. A coalition of law professors filed an amicus brief mapping constitutional protections, courtroom discretion limits, and symbolic speech. They cited cases on attire, religious expression, and service insignia. Their conclusion was crisp: a Purple Heart worn by its recipient, absent disruptive conduct, is protected expression intertwined with identity. The brief circulated widely, becoming talking points on nightly news. Beckett's allies tried a last tactic, insinuating Willard sought fame or office. Willard released a 3-sentence statement: "I'm not running for anything. I'm standing for something. That's enough." Donations to veterans' legal aid spiked again. A high school civics teacher assigned the case study. Her students debated power, symbolism, and dignity. Some brought grandparents' medals for show and tell. On the hearing day, rain softened to mist. Willard arrived with Rowena and Malcolm. Captain Whitaker met them on the steps. Anita stood among cameras, notebook tucked like a keepsake. Inside the panel asked precise questions. Rowena's answers were scalpel clean. Beckett's counsel invoked control and optics. The panel returned to rights and limits. The room's temperature altered, cooler, clearer. Afterward, no immediate ruling. Outside, microphones gathered like birds. Willard spoke briefly. Authority must be accountable to the values it claims to protect. He thanked veterans for standing with him and asked for patience. A child stepped forward, Jaden's little sister, offering a purple construction paper heart. "For you," she whispered. Willard pinned it beside the real one, eyes shining. That evening, neighborhood porches glowed. Someone strung lights across Willard's railings. Someone else left a casserole. The mail contained a letter from a Gold Star mother. "My son never came home. Seeing your medal honors him too." Willard carried the letter to Lorraine's picture and read it aloud, feeling the quiet expand, then settle like a protective quilt. Anita's next story opened with a simple sentence: "This was never about a piece of metal." She traced how symbols anchor memory, how institutions earn trust or spend it, how communities decide what dignity costs. She ended with veterans' faces, black, white, brown, standing shoulder to shoulder. The last photo captured Willard's profile, calm and unbowed against courthouse stone. Tara, watching from her apartment, texted, "Proud of you, Daddy." Malcolm replied with a link. Another veteran clinic opening in a neighboring county. Willard set his phone down and stepped onto the porch, breathing Alabama night air. He could hear distant traffic, faint laughter, a radio murmuring a gospel hymn. The storm hadn't ended, but the ground felt steadier. Across the city, more letters, more medals, more stories gathered momentum. Veterans arrived not to shout, but to be counted. Developers studied headlines. Club boards convened emergency meetings. Judges reread canons with new attentiveness. Birmingham did what cities do under pressure: reveal itself. And Willard Franklin, back straight, gaze level, kept standing where symbol met principle, where silence finally met consequence. The loan officer smirked, asking if Willard's medals were music awards. Each letter arriving at his porch proved what he already knew. His story wasn't an outlier, but a pattern. The ethics panel agreed to investigate Judge Beckett, warning the process could take months. "We'll be thorough," the chair wrote. "We appreciate your patience." Pressure carved new lines into Willard's face. His leg burned. Old nightmares roared back. Public outrage finally pushed the VA to restore his pension, but the delay drained savings he'd guarded since Lorraine passed. One sleepless night, pain gnawing, the phone rang. "Mr. Franklin," an elderly voice said, "Judge Samuel Tompkins here, retired." "We've never met," Tompkins continued, "but I shared the bench with Ronald Beckett. Off the record, his armor is political. The governor was his law school roommate. The attorney general stood at his wedding. They won't let him drop without a fight." Willard thanked him. "I'm not destroying a man," he said. "I'm protecting meaning." Tompkins sighed. "Principles are pricey now, Mr. Franklin." Beckett's never been tested. Men gifted ladders can't imagine climbing. When the call ended, Willard tallied his unlikely allies: Rowena Washington's legal steel, Malcolm's army of law students, Anita Chen's relentless reporting, General Richards's reach, Captain Whitaker's testimony, neighbors scrubbing hate from walls at midnight. Each ally embodied the country Willard bled for, standing beside the version Beckett represented. Two Americas wrestled in one courthouse. Lines were chalked, stakes unmistakable. Beckett could summon money, status, and old networks. Willard had sacrifice, the gravity of dignity, and a growing chorus insisting respect isn't selective. History, he knew, cracks along such seams. July's heat pressed down when the Ethics Commission unexpectedly fast-tracked review, rare, signaling gravity. Public pressure made clear this wasn't petty decorum. It was a referendum on honoring sacrifice inside institutions built on citizens' service. Rowena organized evidence, bias patterns, retaliation, conflicts. Willard's quiet refusal had become movement. Would America practice its creed or merely recite it? Beckett sensed the tide shifting and prepared a counterpunch. He'd never lost in arenas that mattered to him. His climb, elite school, prestige firm, judgeship, skated atop pedigree and patronage. Willard's defiance threatened not just his authority, but the scaffolding that lifted similar men for generations. He moved to make the battlefield his choosing. The strike came as a defamation suit. $3 million, alleging Willard incited hostility against the court and endangered staff. It wasn't about damages. It was about intimidation. Friendly officials issued statements cloaked in respect for the bench, wagons circling with careful words. Beckett toured sympathetic shows, claiming persecution under the banner of decorum. "This was never about a medal," he told a friendly host. "It's about impartiality." Meanwhile, his allies hired investigators to comb Willard's service. They found nothing, but shadows don't need facts, just repetition. Outside, a rally for judicial independence gathered, speakers praising law and order while not naming Willard, yet painting Beckett as bulwark against chaos. Police stops multiplied, 3 in a week, each stretched to fray patience. Tanya received vile emails. Malcolm's car was keyed. The message, "We see you." Willard refused to snap. "They want a headline," he told Rowena. "I won't give it." Quiet steadiness stayed his tactic. Rage was their trap. He'd drilled for ambushes all his life. Digging through filings, Willard traced Beckett's ties to developers who leveraged legal technicalities to push black families from gentrifying blocks. Donations flowed through golf club friendships, rulings curiously aligned. July polarized everything. What began as respect for service was recast as judicial independence versus mob pressure. Commentators framed him as symbol, foil, or pawn, depending on audience. Conservative voices warned of activist veterans menacing courts. Progressive voices spotlighted a white judge policing a black veteran's right to honor sacrifice. The VA again reviewed Willard's benefits, freezing pain care and PTSD therapy over unspecified discrepancies. Anonymous bar complaints targeted Rowena's firm. An IRS audit opened precision that felt less like chance than message. Beckett's circle squeezed local businesses. The grocer who'd cut Willard's credit met surprise health inspections. His barber of 20 years got code citations long ignored. Opinion columns asked whether Willard was being used by partisans to hobble courts, language that patronized his agency while laundering doubts about his judgment. He read them, then rechecked his stance. Community whispers revealed Beckett had a history. Others pressured after crossing him, most silenced before air found their stories. Anita's editor fielded calls from advertisers threatening withdrawals. He stood firm but demanded triple verification. Then Willard's shrapnel shifted, bolts of pain, numbness down his right leg. With benefits on hold, options narrowed, hospital bills stacked. From a sterile room, Willard kept the center. "I've seen worse," he told Malcolm. "No one's shooting." Malcolm squeezed his hand. "Not with bullets." The narrative machine asked the crowd for predictions. Would intimidation win, or would quiet dignity? Click-like. Choose one or two. Willard closed his eyes, hearing Lorraine. "Stand. Don't harden. Hold steady." The hinge arrived on an August scorcher when Anita dropped her most explosive piece, The Court of King Becket, Discrimination, Cash, and Compulsion. She'd pried loose internal emails. One read, "Avoid certain demographics. You know which cause problems." Worse, a clerk released audio. Beckett sneering about these people, and Willard needing to learn his place. Authenticated. Dated. Within hours, former clerks corroborated years of striking black jurors at disproportionate rates under the euphemism balance. The FBI opened a preliminary civil rights inquiry. DOJ's Civil Rights Division launched a broader patterns and practices review. Military leaders from across administrations issued a rare joint statement condemning efforts to diminish symbols of sacrifice worn by those who served. Jaden Williams, the young defendant, was fully cleared as misconduct in his arrest surfaced. Officers went on leave. The chief apologized. Veterans organizations filed an amicus brief bolstering Willard. Cases, statutes, tradition. Decorations are protected expression, even in courts, absent disruption. Anita traced Beckett's investments into private prison companies. Sentencing data showed harsher terms for Black and Hispanic defendants. Stress slammed Willard's health. He was readmitted. Outrage spiked again. A decorated veteran hospitalized without active benefits because of reviews. From his bed, he gave his first statement. This was never personal. It's whether we honor sacrifice equally and whether the Constitution applies to everyone. Veterans kept vigil outside, medals glinting under streetlights like constellations. As his world narrowed to monitors and beeps, Beckett panicked. He ordered staff to delete emails, shred notes on jury practices. He didn't know Melissa Saunders, the newest clerk, had been documenting everything since Anita's first article. She went to federal investigators, detailing attempted obstruction. The governor, Beckett's old roommate, edged away at a press conference recalibrating. Book deals chased Willard. He declined. "This isn't commerce," he told Rowena. Congress announced hearings on judicial discrimination, with Willard central. Subpoenas followed for Beckett's records. Testimony schedules took shape. Complaints multiplied against Beckett as more litigants came forward. The Judicial Qualifications Commission, long cautious, now faced scrutiny of its own and accelerated action. Court Administrator William Harcourt returned, bearing an official apology. Willard listened. "I appreciate the words," he said, "but apologies without reform are flowers on an unclean wound." Evidence kept cresting. Beckett's supporters went silent, then scarce. Meanwhile, neighbors ferried meals, churches organized rides for Tanya and Malcolm. A fundraiser bridged costs until VA benefits restarted. Cards filled Willard's room, veterans and civilians describing quiet humiliations, naming the moment they'd chosen to stand or wished they had. By September, the landscape flipped. Beckett, once untouchable, fought for professional survival. Willard, once isolated, stood amid a coalition broader than uniforms, an argument for dignity and equal justice, stitched together by persistence and proof. The hospital TV carried breaking news. Beckett suspended pending ethics and federal probes. Tanya turned up the volume, eyes wet. They did it? Willard nodded. Systems can work, he murmured. Sometimes they need reminding. He understood the victory was provisional. Structures that protected Beckett were woven tight. The larger fight would demand policy, sunlight, stamina. As strength returned, he prepared to move from bed to dais. The Purple Heart on his tray caught afternoon light, resilient as the day it was pinned. In committee rooms, he'd translate pain into policy. Not vengeance, repair, not spectacle, standards. The medal's meaning had survived attempts to shrink it. He would see the law catch up. The House hearing became an image that traveled. A 66-year-old veteran, upright in a wheelchair, oxygen lines threading his resolve, the Purple Heart unmistakable. The room hushed when he began, voice thin at first, then steady. He spoke for hours without theatrics, building the record brick by brick until the structure of facts carried its own weight. Malcolm's compendium detailed dozens of comparable cases, revealing a lattice of disparate treatment. Willard presented the data like he once briefed operations: clear, spare, exact. Cameras sought heat, he offered light. This isn't politics, he said. Either equal justice binds us or it doesn't. Costumes are for theaters. Courtrooms require truth. Staffers scribbled. Members leaned forward. Beckett testified next, shorn of his bench's altitude. Pressed on the audio, he tried context, then stress. The words collapsed under their own weight. The commission's censure soon followed, unprecedented in scope, citing bias patterns, abuse of authority, conduct unbecoming. Willard's contempt fine was vacated. The court system formally apologized for ordering removal of a combat decoration. Facing removal, Beckett resigned, framing it as resistance to politicization, a story few believed. A review of his decisions expanded from sample to sweep as patterns multiplied. Ultimately, hundreds of cases flagged. Willard launched a fund for veterans facing bias. Malcolm became its inaugural director. Their first clients lined the hallway before the sign was mounted. The Bar Association formed a special unit to audit Beckett's minority-involved cases, then other jurisdictions mirrored the model. Scrutiny rippled outward. An Ohio judge resigned after ordering a Muslim woman to remove her hijab. A California judge faced investigation for sentencing disparities. One refusal in Birmingham had become a mirror many courthouses could no longer avoid. Malcolm graduated with honors. His commencement speech braided duty and clarity, justice blind to irrelevancies, but awake to humanity. Willard, steadier now, beamed from the bleachers. The VA's systemic review, prodded by congressional heat, reinstated his benefits and corrected dozens of similar reviews, disproportionately affecting minority veterans. The bureaucratic fog thinned where the sunlight lingered. Draft legislation took shape, the Franklin Respect Act, protecting veterans' right to wear decorations in legal settings and strengthening judicial accountability. Provisions required tracking juror demographics, publishing recusals, and shielding whistleblowers. The White House invited Willard. He asked the room to include other veterans. Policy should fit many shoulders, he said. Principle isn't a bespoke suit. Disbarment loomed for Beckett, with possible charges for obstruction. Legal bills devoured assets. Old allies learned to forget phone numbers. As autumn settled, Willard resumed limited travel, speaking less about himself than about citizenship as practice. Democracy doesn't self-defend, he told a gym full of teens. Ordinary duty, repeated, that's the shield. Anita's series won nominations, then prizes. Her reporting had mapped not only Beckett's misconduct, but the web that cushioned him. Money, membership, myths. She and Willard forged quiet friendship. Different generations, shared stubbornness for truth. December placed Willard before the Senate Judiciary Committee. He spoke for systems, not slights, aligned practices with ideals, or stop pretending. The chair, a Vietnam vet, summed it cleanly. Mr. Franklin, you fought twice, once in uniform, once in civies. Both mattered. By year's end, the Franklin Respect Act cleared committee, headed for a floor vote. What began with one refusal now drafted scaffolding for accountability, not perfect, but present, something future hands could reinforce and broaden. On New Year's Eve, family crowded Willard's living room. Tanya's cooking filled the house. Malcolm flew in from his civil rights job. The TV showed fireworks, but the celebration was local. Survival braided with purpose. Willard lifted a glass. To Lorraine, who told me to hold ground. To dignity, Tanya added. To justice in progress, Malcolm finished. Months later, in the East Room, the president signed the Franklin Respect Act. Its scope stretched beyond medals, record-keeping, transparency, protection for those who speak up. Willard stood in dress blues, Purple Heart bright and uncontroversial at last. Around him, veterans of many eras and hues stood shoulder to shoulder, stories different, kinship identical, law catching up to truth. Across town, in a smaller apartment, Ronald Beckett watched alone, disbarred, indicted for obstruction, club cards revoked, investments bleeding out. The camera cut to Jaden Williams beside Willard, now working at the foundation, guiding others through corridors that once threatened him. Standing up isn't always loud, Jaden told a reporter. Sometimes it's simply refusing to move. With proper care restored, surgeons finally removed Willard's fragment. Recovery was slower than pride allowed, but steady. Anita's series won the Pulitzer, widening the lens beyond one courtroom to the ecosystems that shelter abuse. In her speech, she credited Willard's quiet insistence. He could have taken off the medal. He made us look closer instead. Willard's restraint proved stronger than thunder. He'd sidestepped every trap, baited with anger, holding the moral altitude until even skeptics could see the valley floor. Malcolm passed the bar with distinction and specialized in veterans' rights, his practice tempered by first-hand witness. Alabama's judiciary shifted, more diverse benches, biased training, sunlight on jury selection where shadows once pooled. Willard visited schools, translating civics into verbs. Patriotism isn't hush, he said, it's accountability. At the VFW National Convention, thousands stood as he took the stage. Freedom needs defenders at home too, he said. Sometimes weapons are words, sometimes they're restraint. Always, they're courage. Applause rolled like surf, steady, cleansing, impossible to push back. His story seeded others. An Oregon student challenged a hair code targeting black styles and won. A Michigan nurse revealed discriminatory triage patterns and forced reform. Each cited Willard's example, resolve without spectacle, backbone without bile. Then came an envelope, Ronald Beckett's handwriting. Inside, the simple apology, unadorned, no hedging about context or misunderstanding. Mr. Franklin, the letter read, my order came from discomfort with what you represent, a black man whose sacrifice commanded respect I withheld. I cannot undo the harm, but I can name it. Willard sat with it for days, then visited Beckett privately. No cameras, no statements. Closure arrived not as triumph, but as unknotted weight. On Lorraine's anniversary, Willard walked the rows of identical stones, democracy of sacrifice in white marble. He rested a hand on her marker, Purple Heart pinned to his jacket. We nudged the world, Wren, he whispered. Not enough. Never enough, but better. Legacy, he'd learned, is incremental. 1,000 stubborn adjustments toward alignment with promised ideals. His reach extended past Birmingham. In a German hospital, a young black soldier received a Purple Heart with unqualified respect. Months later, she walked into an American courtroom wearing it. The judge noticed and nodded. The path from battlefield to bench had been smoothed by someone she'd never meet. A veteran who refused to be diminished. What would you do? The narrator's voice asked the feed. Stand firm on principle or take the easier compliance. Has Willard's journey reframed courage for you? Share below. If this story moved you, like and subscribe. Let it find someone who needs strength today. Justice doesn't guard itself. It leans on ordinary people refusing to shrink. Remember, the quiet choice can thunder. Willard Franklin's refusal wasn't rebellion, it was reverence, honoring brothers and sisters in arms, and the promise stitched into the flag that draped too many caskets. Institutions hide behind words like decorum, but dignity isn't theirs to grant or strip. It belongs to the human who carried it through fire. His stand exposed how systems shield power and disguise prejudice as procedure, and how that armor fails when pressed by unflinching moral clarity. One person's balance can tilt a room, then a city, then a statute, but vigilance must persist. The default drift is always away from equity. Accountability is a habit, not an event. Have you faced a moment to hold or fold? Willard's path suggests the cost is real, but so is the yield, precedent, protection, possibility for those behind you. If courage sparked something in you, tell us. Someone else might need your story tonight. Share this with a friend who believes dignity doesn't need permission. Thank you for walking this arc from insult to insight, from courthouse order to federal law. The greatest battles aren't always noisy. Sometimes they're a man in a hallway declining to be made smaller. Sometimes they're a community choosing to stand, not shout. Sometimes they're a pen signing reforms because someone refused to bend. Willard's Purple Heart marked bloodshed far away, but its meaning was tested at home. When asked to erase it, he answered with presence. That answer rippled into accountability, then statute, then new expectations. If justice is scaffolding, courage is the beam that keeps it from listing. Hold your beam, others will steady theirs. As this chapter closes, remember, institutions learn when people insist they learn. Write your insistence. In policy drafts, at school board mics, by intervening when silence would be easier. If Willard's steadiness helped you picture your own, say so, then practice it. The next room needing balance may be closer than you think. Malcolm's binders mapped dozens of similar cases, revealing a lattice of disparate treatment. Willard presented the evidence like a field briefing, precise, unsentimental, complete. He refused showmanship. This isn't partisan, he said. Either equal protection binds us or it doesn't. Committee members stopped glancing at phones and started taking notes. You could feel attention harden into obligation. National networks ran split screens. Willard's steady testimony beside sound bites from Beckett's counsel alleging a political witch hunt. The contrast spoke louder than commentary. Justice isn't mood dependent, Willard said. It's either even-handed or it's cosplay. Staffers exchanged looks. Reporters underlined quotes. Outside, veterans in raincoats formed a quiet line, metal's brightest traffic lights against gray drizzle. The next day, Judge Beckett appeared diminished, without the bench's altitude. Pressed about the recording, he tried context, then stress, then poor phrasing. Each explanation crumpled under playback. He faltered when asked why black jurors were struck at triple the rate. Balancing the panel, he said. The phrase landed like a confession framed as management speak. Weeks later, the Ethics Commission issued an extraordinary censure. Bias patterns substantiated, authority abused, decorum weaponized. Willard's contempt fine was vacated. The court apologized for ordering the removal of a combat decoration. The language was institutional and cool, but the meaning was hot and unmistakable. A line had been crossed, and the system finally named it. Facing likely removal, Beckett resigned, spinning it as defense of judicial independence. Few bought the framing. A review of his decisions widened from sample to sweep as troubling patterns multiplied. Hundreds of cases were flagged for reconsideration. Litigants who'd felt invisible found phone calls returned. Old rulings, once untouchable, now sat on bright, uncomfortable tables. Willard launched the Franklin Veterans Justice Initiative, funded by envelopes that had flooded his mailbox. Malcolm became its first director, converting outrage into intake forms, motions, rides to hearings, and translated explanations of impossible letters. Their office smelled like coffee and toner. The waiting room stayed full. Courage was one ingredient. Logistics did the rest. The state bar formed a task force, to audit Beckett's minority-involved cases. Then peer states copied the template. Scrutiny spread. In Ohio, a judge resigned after ordering a Muslim woman to remove her hijab. In California, a judge faced investigation for sentencing disparities. One refusal in Birmingham became a mirror many courthouses could not dodge. Malcolm graduated with honors. His commencement speech braided duty and clarity. "Our oath is to reality," he said, "not the convenience of those holding the gavel." Willard, healing but not slowed in spirit, beamed from the bleachers. Outside, veterans shook Malcolm's hand like passing a baton. The ceremony felt less like finish than formation. Under congressional heat, the VA combed through suspended cases, restored Willard's benefits, and fixed dozens of similarly frozen files, disproportionately veterans of color. Bureaucracy moved like winter honey, but sunlight warmed it. Willard's pain care resumed. His sleep steadied. The letter announcing reinstatement was dry and bureaucratic. He framed it anyway, a receipt for persistence. Draft legislation took shape, the Franklin Respect Act. It guaranteed veterans' right to wear decorations in legal settings, required courts to track juror demographics and publish recusals, and strengthened whistleblower protections. Right policy that outlives headlines, Willard told staffers. He requested a White House meeting include other vets. "Principle shouldn't fit only me," he said. Disbarment proceedings shadowed Beckett. Obstruction charges hovered, inevitable as weather. Legal fees ate his investments. Club memberships evaporated. Allies became acquaintances. Acquaintances forgot his number. Meanwhile, Willard traveled lightly, church basements, school gyms, union halls, offering civics as a verb. "Democracy doesn't self-stabilize," he told a crowd. "We are the torque wrench." Anita's reporting won national awards, but she kept the notebook open. "The web remains," she said. "Cut one strand, and others tense." She and Willard became quiet friends. Different decades, same appetite for facts. December placed Willard before the Senate Judiciary Committee. He spoke of systems, not slights. "Align practice with promise," he said, "or admit you won't." The chair, a Vietnam veteran, closed the session with a soldier's concision. "Mr. Franklin, you fought twice, once down range, once down the hall. Both mattered." Weeks later, the Franklin Respect Act cleared committee with bipartisan votes. It had been hammered wider, veterans' dignity provisions plus durable accountability scaffolding. Draft pages read like guardrails, finally bolted. New Year's Eve gathered family in Willard's living room. Tanya's gumbo steamed. Malcolm flew in between filings. The TV showed cities counting down, but the celebration felt local. Survival braided with purpose. Willard raised a glass. "To Lorraine, who told me to stand." "To dignity," Tanya added. "To justice in progress," Malcolm finished. Midnight arrived like a promise. Months later, in the East Room, pens clicked. The president signed the Franklin Respect Act into law. It stretched beyond medals, transparency in jury selection, required reporting, clear avenues for complaints, shields for truth tellers. Willard stood in dress blues, Purple Heart no longer arguable. Veterans flanked him, eras, branches, skin tones, each story different, allegiance identical. Across town, in a smaller apartment, Ronald Beckett watched alone, disbarred, indicted for obstruction, investments drained by fees. The camera cut to Jaden Williams beside Willard, now a foundation case manager, guiding people through halls that once threatened him. "Standing up isn't always loud," Jaden told a reporter. "Sometimes it's just refusing to be moved." With benefits restored, surgeons finally removed Willard's shrapnel. Recovery was patient work. Laps down long corridors, a therapist counting quietly, stubborn muscle relearning faith. Anita's series won the Pulitzer, widening the focus beyond one courtroom to an ecosystem of indulgence and insulation. On stage, she pointed to Willard. "He refused a quiet indignity," she said. "We listened. Restraint proved stronger than thunder." Willard had sidestepped every trap baited with anger, holding moral altitude until even skeptics saw the valley floor. Malcolm passed the bar with distinction and specialized in veterans' rights, his litigation sharpened by witness. Alabama's judiciary shifted, more diverse slates, mandatory bias training, sunlight on selection practices where shadows once pooled. Willard visited schools with a civics talk that landed. Patriotism isn't hush, he told teenagers. It's accountability. At the VFW convention, thousands stood as he spoke. Freedom needs defenders at home too, he said. Sometimes the weapon is words. Sometimes it's restraint. Always it's courage. The applause didn't roar. It rolled. Steady, convincing, undeniable. His story seeded others. In Oregon, a student challenged a hair code targeting black styles and won. In Michigan, a nurse exposed discriminatory triage patterns and forced reform. Each cited Willard's example: resolve without spectacle, backbone without bile. Then an envelope arrived, Beckett's handwriting, inside an apology, without hedges, excuses, or the usual "if anyone was offended." "Mr. Franklin," it read, "my order came from discomfort with who you are. A black man whose sacrifice demanded respect I withheld. I cannot undo harm. I can name it." Willard held the letter a while, then visited Beckett privately. No cameras, no statements. Closure arrived not as triumph, but as a knot untying. Accountability braided to grace. On Lorraine's anniversary, Willard walked rows of white marble, the democracy of sacrifice under a mild sky. He touched her name, the Purple Heart, pinned to his jacket as always. "We nudged the world, Wren," he whispered. "Not enough, never enough, but better." He'd learned that legacy is incremental, stubborn inches of practice tugging policy toward promise. The reach extended far beyond Birmingham. In Germany, a young black soldier received a Purple Heart with solemn respect. Back home, months later, she wore it into a courtroom. The judge noticed, nodded. The path from battlefield to bench had been graded by someone she'd never meet, a veteran who refused to be diminished so others wouldn't be. What would you do?" the narrator asked. "Hold your ground or choose easy compliance?" Has Willard's journey reframed courage for you? Share below. If this story steadied you, like and subscribe. Let it reach someone who needs nerve tonight. Justice doesn't guard itself. It leans on ordinary people who decline to be smaller on command. Remember, the quiet choice can thunder. Willard's refusal wasn't rebellion, it was reverence, honoring brothers and sisters in arms and the promise stitched into flags that drape too many caskets. Institutions hide behind decorum, but dignity isn't theirs to grant or strip. It belongs to the human who carried it through fire and still stands. His stand exposed how systems shield power and mislabel prejudice as procedure, and how that armor fails under unflinching moral clarity. One person's balance can tilt a room, then a city, then a statute. But vigilance must persist. The default drift is away from equity. Accountability is habit, not event. Practice it until reflex becomes culture. Have you faced the moment to hold or fold? Willard's path suggests the cost is real, but so is the yield, precedent, and a protection for those walking after you. If courage sparked something, tell us. Someone else might need your story's lantern. Share this with a friend who believes dignity doesn't need permission or stage lights. Thank you for traveling this arc, from insult to insight, from gavel crack to law signed. The greatest battles aren't always noisy. Sometimes they're a man in a hallway refusing to be made smaller. Sometimes they're a community choosing to stand, not shout. Sometimes they're a pen rewriting rules because someone wouldn't bend. Willard's Purple Heart marked bloodshed far away, but its meaning was tested at home. Asked to erase it, he answered with presence. That answer rippled outward: accountability, statute, new expectations. If justice is scaffolding, courage is the beam that keeps it plumb. Hold your beam. Others will steady theirs beside you until structure holds. As this chapter closes, remember, institutions learn only when people insist they learn. Write your insistence in policy drafts, school board mics, courthouse lines, quiet interventions. If Willard's steadiness helped you picture your own, say so, and practice it. The next room needing balance may be the one you're already standing in, wondering if you belong. You do. The invitation isn't gilded, it's implied by citizenship. Bring patience, facts, and a spine that doesn't need volume to be heard. Bring neighbors. Bring notes. Bring the memory of someone who taught you not to flinch. If you've worn a uniform, wear your honor. If you haven't, wear your decency. Both change rooms. In the months after the signing, the Franklin Act didn't solve everything. No law does, but it published numbers that used to hide and protected truths that used to shatter messengers. Judges reread canons, clerks asked new questions, lawyers filed motions with fresh spine. The culture moved a notch. Real change sounds like a ratchet, not a cheer. The foundation's hotline rang steady. Volunteers translated paperwork into people speak, drove ride shares at midnight, sat beside strangers in wooden pews that passed for waiting rooms. Willard kept a chair by the door and a pen in his pocket. Everyone through that door is someone's whole world, he'd remind the staff. Treat them accordingly. Anita kept reporting. Her follow-ups found copycat reforms in counties you've never heard of, plain places where habit had done quiet harm. She avoided victory laps. Sunlight needs maintenance, she said. Clouds gather. Willard agreed. He spoke less, listened more, and pushed for data to remain public when headlines wandered. Accountability without memory dissolves. Malcolm argued a case in an echoing courtroom where a bailiff squinted at a veteran's ribbons, then thought better. Progress is the moment something doesn't happen, Malcolm told Willard afterward. They laughed, then didn't. Absence can be a triumph. Unwritten citations, unsent emails, unspoken slurs. You can't photograph it, but people feel lighter anyway. Tanya organized voter clinics at libraries, cross-stitching democracy into Saturdays. She told volunteers, "We're not saving people, we're removing speed bumps." Willard watched a kid register while a grandmother told a story about 1965. The grandmother touched Willard's purple heart gently, like blessing and benediction. "Took them long enough," she said. "Thank you for pushing." Letters kept coming. Some were printed from phones. Some were penned in careful cursive. A retired Marine wrote, "I wore my medals to probate. Judge said, 'Thank you for bringing the truth of the country into this room.' I cried in the parking lot." Willard folded the letter slowly, placed it atop the growing stack labeled "Proof." On a quiet afternoon, Willard visited Beckett again. They sat with coffee in chipped mugs. "I learned how many hands kept me unaccountable," Beckett said, not looking up. "They called it respect." Willard nodded. "Respect without responsibility is insulation." They talked a little longer, then not at all. Leaving, Willard felt something unhook, gentle as thread. At the cemetery, Willard traced Lorraine's name, the stone cool under summer heat. "You were right," he said. "Standing is its own language." A breeze moved flag edges. Distant mowers hummed. He told her about Jaden at the foundation, Anita's Pulitzer, Malcolm's first big win, Tanya's clinics. "We didn't fix it," he said. "We fortified it." The foundation's lobby got a bookshelf labeled Tools, pocket constitutions, sample motions, plain language guides. A handwritten sign above it read, "Take what you need. Bring back what you learn." People did. They returned with notes, names of decent clerks, lists of unhelpful forms, and victories too small for headlines but not for lives. A high school asked Willard to keynote senior night. He told them courage wasn't a feeling but a practice. "You don't wait to be fearless, Enan," he said. "You act through fear, guided by values you decided beforehand." He paused. "Pick your values now, before the room tests you." The gym was suddenly quieter than basketball ever made it. At a small-town courthouse, a judge paused when a veteran entered with medals. "Before we proceed," she said, "thank you for your service." Routine words, sincerely spoken, landed like repair. The docket rolled. No speeches. Later, the veteran emailed the foundation. "Nothing happened, Mr. Franklin. It was wonderful." Willard forwarded it to Tanya with a smile. A museum curated an exhibit on symbols, robes, gavels, medals, protest signs, pocket constitutions creased from overuse. Willard stood before a display case, holding a purple heart beside a courtroom sketch. The placard read, "Meaning is negotiated publicly," he whispered, "and defended privately." A docent watched him and understood without asking, the way people sometimes do. The foundation hired more staff. Malcolm trained intake volunteers on the art of listening without rushing. "People aren't paragraphs," he said, "they're chapters." Willard kept greeting at the door. When someone thanked him, he'd say, "You would have done the same," and mostly mean it. Faith in strangers became his favorite form of stubbornness. He still woke some nights to sand-hot memories, but the edge had dulled. Therapy, time, and purpose made a braid stronger than any strand. On the worst nights, he'd walk the porch, touch the metal lightly, and think of every letter stacked on his table, proof that the country contained multitudes, including the part that tried. A freshman congresswoman visited the foundation, holding a marked-up copy of the Franklin Act. "We're drafting amendments," she said. "Stronger reporting, faster remedies." Willard pointed to the bookshelf labeled Tools. "Start here," he smiled. She took a guide, then left her staffer to volunteer at intake for an hour. Policy needs fingerprints, not just votes. On a Sunday afternoon, Willard and Tanya cooked for neighbors. Conversation drifted from football to local races to an elder's story of marching across a bridge long ago. Someone asked Willard what changed most. "Not me," he said. "The rooms." He looked around. "And the people in them." Lorraine's photo on the mantel seemed to nod back. As the year turned again, invitations arrived. Keynotes, panels, fundraisers. Willard accepted sparingly. "Choose rooms that choose work," he told Malcolm. He preferred courthouse benches and school auditoriums to chandeliers. Impact glints in fluorescent light, too. At night, he'd write notes to new veterans. "Your story matters, bring it. We'll translate together. Nobody walks these halls alone." The last letter he opened that week was from a teenager. "I spoke up in class because of you." He set the paper down, blinked hard, and laughed at himself. "Soft old soldier," he murmured. He pinned the note to a corkboard, right beside a purple paper heart a child had given him outside that first hearing. If you've carried this story with us, consider where your steadiness belongs. Comment with the room you'll help balance: a classroom, council meeting, family table. Like and subscribe if you believe quiet courage can tilt systems. Share this with someone tempted to shrink. Justice doesn't defend itself. It needs ordinary people who refuse to be moved. Lesson 1. Dignity doesn't ask permission. If you've lived long enough to remember draft cards, gold star families, and evening news from far-off deserts, you know that medals don't glamorize war. They memorialize it. When 66-year-old Willard Franklin refused to peel a Purple Heart off his lapel, he wasn't making noise. He was protecting meaning. Many of us were raised to stand when the anthem plays and remove our caps in church. Same principle here. Respect is not stagecraft. A judge can command silence, but he can't command a veteran to erase blood-earned truth. For older Americans, Willard's quiet no felt familiar. The calm line we draw when someone mistakes authority for ownership of our dignity. Lesson 2. Courage is contagious. Community makes it durable. You and I have seen towns rally after floods, fires, and lean winters. That same muscle showed up when Willard was fined for contempt. Veterans mailed their ribbons, neighbors scrubbed slurs off his door, and a young reporter worked late to pry facts from locked drawers. The cumulative effect was what our generation calls backbone. Courage lit the first match. Community kept the flame steady through windy days, scholarships under review, pensions on hold, and whispers meant to tire a good man out. Older folks know this rhythm. You cook a casserole, sign an affidavit, make a phone call, show up in your Sunday jacket. Little hinges swing big doors. Lesson 3. Real change clicks like a ratchet, not a drum roll. Those of us with silver in our hair understand that reforms rarely arrive like fireworks. They arrive like a series of clicks, data published, rules clarified, rights affirmed, bad habits exposed. Willard's stand did not end with headlines. It produced audits, ethics findings, and a law that protects service honors in our courts and shines light on how juries are chosen. That's not spectacle, that's maintenance, like checking the oil before a long trip or replacing a porch step before someone falls. Progress is a practice. It asks for patience, paperwork, and people who keep showing up after the cameras go home. Closing note. If you're 65 or 85, you already know. America improves when everyday adults, grandparents, deacons, union stewards, retired sergeants, refuse to be made smaller. Willard didn't chase a fight. He kept faith with a promise. That's the kind of steady courage our kids and grandkids can build on. Friends, you've heard how one veteran's quiet backbone turned a courtroom scuffle into lasting safeguards. I'd love your wisdom. In your lifetime, what small stand, yours or someone else's, made the biggest difference? Was it a letter to a school board, a testimony at City Hall, a neighbor you defended, a salute you refused to cheapen? Tell us in the comments so others can borrow your courage. If this story gave you steadiness, please like, subscribe, and tap the bell so more folks, especially our kids and grandkids, can learn how everyday Americans keep justice upright, one deliberate no at a time.